there. I'm your host, Leslie Randolph. I'm a self-confidence coach for teenage girls and the self-confidence coach you wish you had as a teen. Honestly, I'm the self-confidence coach I wish I had as a teen because I know I could have saved myself and my mother a whole lot of heartache if I'd only known then what I know now. I hope to save you some of that suffering by sharing the lessons I learned late in life right here on Why Didn't They Tell Us? Welcome to the show. Hey, happy people. Welcome back to Why Didn't They Tell Us? And welcome to today's show. Now, before we dive in, I just want to say, hey, and thank you so much for being here. Whether you're one of my longtime lovely listeners or a new friend, I'm just so happy you're here and I'm really thankful for it. If you are new around here, welcome. I'm Leslie and I'm a self-confidence coach for teenage girls. And through one-on-one coaching, school programming, and private workshops, I help teens develop the skill of self-confidence. Yes, it is a skill and one that can be learned and one that can be strengthened. And I have the privilege of doing that work. And thanks to the power of Zoom and modern technology, I get to do it with teens all over the world. So if your daughter could benefit from a boost of self-confidence or just some tips and tools to help better manage anxiety and overwhelm and doubt and fear and all those feelings that can take up that emotional real estate during the tween and teen years, please reach out. I would love to help you help her. And if you just need a little guidance, please be sure to visit my website, confidencecoachforgirls.com. If you go under the free resources tab, you can grab my free guide with 6 simple steps to help your daughter cultivate self-confidence. Now, while I work with teens, this podcast is for the moms who love them and for the moms that still have a teenage girl still inside of them. We all do. We all have that inner teen who can sometimes feel insecure, uncertain, and scared. And now we're the ones raising kids and just hoping they have all the confidence we wish we had when we were their age. This is why the podcast shares the lessons I learned late in life so you know better sooner, so you can do better sooner because we model this for our kids, right? And very lucky for me, I don't do it alone. I am often joined on the show by amazing guests like Rin-rin Yu, who we have the pleasure of meeting today. Rin-rin is an award-winning print and television journalist, magazine editor, and photographer. She is also the author of Goodbye French Fry, her debut novel from Penguin Random House that is coming out in February. So mark your calendars. You're going to want to get this book. Goodbye French Fry is a funny, warm story about American-born Chinese 5th grader named Ping Ping, who's busy balancing cultural differences, a school bully who calls her French Fry, and the possibility of a move from New York to Kenya for her father's job. Loosely based on Rin-rin's own upbringing, Goodbye French Fry aims to normalize everyday stories featuring Asian American characters and to celebrate the small moments in childhood that quietly shape who a child becomes. In a time when children are pushed to achieve more, and do it earlier, from travel sports to AP classes to the pressure of standing out in a very competitive college admissions process, but then also to not stand out in a very wanting to be all the same middle school process. Goodbye French Fry helps to remind both children and parents that the seemingly ordinary moments, the firsts in a child's life, are just as essential to their growth and future success. And in those ordinary moments, my friends, that is where self-confidence is found. Ooh, I'm excited for today's show. Rin-rin, welcome.
Thank you so much, Leslie. It's so great to be here.
Oh, it is so great to have you. I said before we got on the air how much I loved being in a room with you, with Rin-rin, because I've been with her all this time reading the book. And now I get to pull back the curtain and learn about, the woman behind the words. So Rin-rin, I know I gave you a big bio there to kick off the show, but really what inspired you to write this book?
Oh gosh. So, I'm a writer. I've always wanted to write a book. And it was funny because I first started trying to write my parents' childhoods, right, which were a long time ago and in another country. And I was like, oh God, I have to just think about even the historical part of it. Like if my dad is walking down the sidewalk with my grandmother, is there a sidewalk? Is it made of cement? Is it made of asphalt? Is it dirt? Like I'm like, I can't, so I was like, I'm just going to start with what I know, which is from when I was born or whenever I became conscious as a child. And I was just thinking back to like, everyone has funny childhood stories. And I think, and I do too. And so I just thought it'd be fun to kind of share those. But it was also where, when I was growing up, there were no books, none, with an American-born Asian character. I mean, there were some with Asian characters. A lot of them had like come over with their parents. So they were experiencing the U.S. with their parents. They didn't speak the language, or they were living still in Asia. And it was really, really hard for me to kind of relate to that. And I'm like, well, if I'm one person and I have a bunch of other Asian friends who were growing up like me, and there's millions more, there's other kids who came over from other countries. Like there's so many of us like that who just want to see like, well, how does this regular Asian kid just function in their little suburban neighborhood? So I wrote one.
And so glad that you did. And it's so interesting when we don't see other people like us, right? When we don't see ourselves in stories, in TV, in media, that affects our self-confidence and our self-worth and that sense of self in general.
Yeah. Yeah, it totally does. And I mean, and you remember like when you're a kid, or when you grow up, you're like, oh, I love this one book. Oh, this one character, and then you start to think about, wow, how much that character really influenced a lot of who you would become and a lot of what you would model. So the closest I got was Ramona Quimby, right? Everyone loves those series because she had an older sister. I had an older sister, and they lived in the suburbs, and we lived in the suburbs, and her haircut was like mine. It was like a little pixie cut kind of thing. It was very typical of like Asian kids at that time, and I guess still today. But I was clearly seeking someone like me, and that was the closest I could get. So I mean, I love those stories, but I'm just like, how great would it be if we had more versions of her around, right?
Yeah. And someone again that like shared that experience with you, and not this like big grand experience, right? And like you talk about, like there will be stories of people coming to America, and that's like this very big thing. This was and to read Goodbye French Fry, there isn't that. Well, I'm not going to spoil the book, but I think we're going to have to talk about it. There is this one defining moment, but it wasn't, like this earth-shattering, life-changing, though it was, as you call, like an ordinary moment, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, and there's so many of those in my childhood and everyone's childhoods, and a lot of it's easier in retrospect to be like, oh, that was a big thing. So what you're alluding to is, we can talk a little bit about it. So there was a bully, right, that I had, and that the character Ping Ping has. His name is Lee Beaumont, which if you went to Washington University, those were my freshman and sophomore dorms. But he's a pain. And she does not know how to get him off her back, and he's harassing her essentially. And I had a very similar person in my life who was doing that to me, and in the end, I essentially confronted him. And the fact, and in a way I wouldn't really advise other children to, but I confronted him, and then he was gone. And that was a really big deal. And when I had done that, it was a big deal, and I knew that it was a big deal, but it also just made me realize, wow, I have the confidence to get someone to back the heck off and leave me alone. And I think I recognize that as a defining moment. And I was only 10 at the time when this happened. And it's to the point that I have now written a book about this guy, right? So, and I know that he probably remembers that happened as well. So I always wonder, like, hey, I wonder if this kid remembers me. And I think my husband was like, he definitely remembers what you did. And I think it was probably a defining moment in his life. Like, maybe I shouldn't have been such a jerk. So I think these little things, I didn't get a trophy for it. It wasn't like a big recital where everyone came to watch. I mean, people saw and they all learned, don't mess with Rin-rin. And, I think, so it was a very big moment, and they happen all the time, right? These little things, and you can't predict them and you can't plan for them, but they definitely shape the trajectory of your life and every child's life.
100%. I want to, so as a confidence coach, I have to ask you, what gave you Rin-rin? And then yes, Ping Ping does the same in the book. Be sure to read it. What gave you that confidence? Like, how did you find that?
I mean, I think I had tried all the things that they suggest back then, and still today. Oh, ignore him. He's, and like giving them like a little grace. Oh, he's probably having a tough time. He's probably whatever. But after a while I was like, I don't have to deal with this anymore. And so I tried all the ways and it didn't work. And so I think I just tried my last resort. And because I was just that fed up at the time. In the book, it wasn't deliberate, but it was still something where she proves that she is strong enough to get him to stop. And I think she underestimated her ability and he underestimated her ability. And it was just, and so everyone kind of realizes, oh, she's a lot stronger than we all knew. And that's powerful, right? For kids to realize how much they can own, how much of their own actions they can take that will change what their day-to-day is going to look like.
Yeah, totally. I sometimes talk to my clients about like, if self-confidence had a voice, it would sound like, I can figure this out and I can handle this. And yes, of course, like I believe in me, but it's like that belief comes from that thought of, I can figure this out and I can handle this. Yeah. And Rin-rin and Ping Ping, they figured it out and they handled it, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things like through the book too, you'll see these little things where she's learning that she can't make. So 10 years old is a very interesting, fun age, right? Because they're not little kids anymore, but they're not high schoolers. So they're still there, but they're old enough to kind of be away from their parents. It's like the first time maybe their parents have let them go somewhere by themselves with their friends, So in the book, she and her best friend go to like the little town village and they get donuts. It's a big deal for them, right? But it's a step towards independence. And they remember that. And I remember the first time my parents would like let me go off somewhere by myself. That's another small moment where it's like, it's not a big deal. I drop my kid off at the store, but it's a big thing for them. And so there was another moment in there where she like forgets her piano recital piece, and which has happened to me, whatever. But at the time when I'm on stage, I am just paralyzed. Like, oh my God, how am I going to get through this? I want to die on this stage, right? But you're like, but I can't because everyone's watching. So you just sort of like,
I can't die in front of everybody. Yes.
Yeah. So, but I remember like, well, what do you do? And they coach you through this sport. They're like, okay, if you, just stop and think and just play again. And it is so embarrassing, but you do it and you get yourself off the stage as fast as possible. But you're like, but I did it. I'm still alive. I can do this. It was not my best performance. So no one's giving me an award, but I'm pretty proud that I got through that. And so I remember those moments, and that gives that confidence of like, and you can get through this, right? And you can do it. And, so my kids also play piano now. And so same thing, like they've messed up. And the first thing I say is, you actually played it really well. So you forgot a part, but the most important thing is you kept going and you finished. And people won't remember necessarily you messed up. They'll just still remember you played really well and you prepared for this. So, and that's a valuable life lesson for anything.
Yeah. And I also, again, thinking of it through my lens of, it's also a life lesson in that we live through embarrassment. I think so often the barrier to self-confidence is the feelings we wish to avoid. Like I wish to avoid failure, embarrassment, rejection. And if you ask like my older teen clients, awkward or cringe, like those are the feelings that I will spend my entire life avoiding. But if we avoid those feelings, we end up missing out on what's on the other side of them. Like the goal is not to avoid them. Actually, the goal is to learn how to feel them and make it to the other side.
Yes. Oh, yes. I mean, because if you don't, then you don't know what to do when it actually happens, right?
And it will. Like this is life. It's going to happen.
It's going to happen. Sorry. Like, you just have to learn how to deal with it. Yeah. So,
yeah. And Ping Ping thrived through it.
Yes. And the thing is with Ping Ping and like and a lot of people, I don't want to just say Asians, but let's just say people in general, kids have a lot of embarrassing things. And so, for her is she grew up with this non-American name. And that is like a big sore point in the book. And she sometimes fantasizes that her name is Megan. And she just wonders if, will she be treated differently if her name is Megan? And it was something similar with, and like people couldn't pronounce my name. And it was like, if anyone could understand the daily, like going through that on a daily basis is so exhausting. And it's also a little embarrassing. You're like, I just wish I had a name people could pronounce, right? Because it is like they'll go through the attendance list and they'll read and they'll stop and you're just like, no, not me again. And you just want to die again at your desk. But, that kind of thing builds a thick skin. And so children like that build, but I also want other children to know you're not the only one who goes through this and it's okay. And in the end, you become a stronger person from it and your name is unique and special. And so I just, I'm like, I'm sure I'm not the only kid who had a different name from everyone else, but it's actually funny. It's funny because I'm now in an office where there's a woman whose name is Catherine, but she goes by Rin. And, my people sometimes just call me Rin. And then we'll be in a meeting and they'll be like, oh, well, Rin and I decided. I'm like, I did not decide that, but so it's unusual for me now to be in a room with someone with the same name. So,
Yeah.
it's like it's kind of
I loved the Megan storyline, and there is a moment in the book, and I love this so much too. Her best friend Anna, she proposes the name Megan to her best friend, and her best friend's like, who I'm not going to quote it correctly, but like, who wants to be ordinary?
Yeah.
And for Ping Ping, who I would imagine felt so unordinary in so many ways and in so many settings, it was like, all I want is to be ordinary.
Yeah.
But ultimately, like she found out, because I'm looking at you, that she's extraordinary, and how we are all different. But I think that that's a really hard thing. You say 10 is a hard age. 10 is also where, like, our brains are seeking so much to fit in and to belong. And I think a lot of that comes with this idea of like, and I'm big air quotes, everybody, like to be normal. I just want to be normal. Right.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I mean, the thing is, in a kid's world, it's so small, right? It's like, your parents and some friends and the grocery store and the library, and like, that's your world. And you don't realize there's a whole other world out there where they're and so you think you're not, air quotes, normal. But if you were able to see beyond your world, you might realize that you're actually really normal because there are a lot of other kids like you out there. But how do you know that if you're not exposed to them? So that's where books, media, all those things, those are really important to bring to those kids. So, so I'm just hoping that if kids read books like mine, they'll be like, oh, there are other kids who go through the same thing. Okay, this isn't so bad, right? Like,
yeah, 100%. And whether it's your upbringing, your background, we are all different, right? Mm-hmm. And that's a beautiful thing. And yes, and there are Ping Pings in the world, and there are Rin-rins, and there are Leslies. But we also all share like the human experience, and I think when we can recognize that is a shared experience, that everyone sort of feels this way, right? Like whether you are a Megan or a Ping Ping, you want to belong, you want to know that you are loved and likable and fit in, and we're all different, but we're this like puzzle that fits together in the world.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I think it's important to, so, I work in university communications, and I have for a while, and it's always very easy to be like, ooh, let's feature this student. This student came from this exotic place, or this person became, I don't know, won all these awards when they were 14 years old, and it's just so, and like, yes, so those are amazing stories and we should definitely share them. And I love hearing about them, but I've always just been like, you guys, I was just the boring suburban kid. And when I applied college, it was really hard to write essays about something. Like, I didn't start a business when I was 12 or like start my own foundation. So I'm always pushing my staff to be like, okay, great, let's feature those people. Well, can we just feature the other students who maybe it doesn't strike you right away, but there is something special. If you're a good journalist and you ask the right questions, you will find out what is special about them. And some big moment that changed their lives or something. And it didn't have to be an award or a trophy or something. But it's there. There's a reason they got into these colleges, because they're smart and they did something. So find out what it is. I think that's really important to also emphasize that it's there, right?
Yep. And we all have it. And that is, if there's one of the things that you harp on again, it's this idea of like the ordinary moments. And now, do you have, I'm just curious, because I have like a Leslie the Life Coach definition of self-confidence. Do you have a Rin-rin definition for an ordinary moment?
Oh gosh. It's so hard because, like I was saying, you can't predict them, and they're also often in retrospect you can look at them. So I think so from a child, I think there's like the ones like when I confronted that bully and I'm like, oh, or when I messed up the piano recital and I came off the stage, I'm like, oh, I didn't die, right? There are those kind of moments. Those are recognizable, but I think as an adult, it'll be just ways, I don't know. I think it's just when there's a moment that you felt like you achieved something and only maybe you knew that, right? Like no one else necessarily like observed it or acknowledged it or gave you an award for it. But it was something you were like, I feel pride or I feel sad or it was something that, and then it sticks with you. I think those are, but no one else knows. So, right. I think that's kind of like one of those ordinary moments that, but they're so important. That's why you call it a moment, right? So,
yeah. And that's, I know that you, recommend people to like that journaling is a big thing for you, right?
Yes.
That like the only reason you were able to even write this book is because you had like chronicled these experiences, not these big moments, but like you could go back to your journals and remember the feelings and the experience all together.
Oh yeah, that's hilarious to read.
Oh, sure. I'm sure you want to talk about cringe. I'm sure I could feel some cringe, but also some love and pride looking through mine. But do you think, you said once, it wasn't the act of punching the bully that mattered, but the sudden feeling of confidence that followed. Rin-rin, like, do you think you had that in that moment, or is it Rin-rin writing about it now that can see it, that like a path shifted because of it?
I think at the moment, I just remember being so thrilled like that it happened. Because I think I knew at that moment it was done. Like he was done. He was never going to come back. And I think when it happened, I was like, I can't believe I just did that. And I didn't know I had it in me to do that. So I think I was sort of like very shocked and proud of myself at the same time. I remember running home to my parents and I'm like, I just punched him, which again is the thing I do not advocate you tell your children to do. Start with ignore them or try to talk to them, whatever, peace resolution. They're better teaching about it now than they were back then. But I remember going home to my parents and being like, I just punched him. And they were like, good. I mean, I think they were like, oh, is he okay? But they were also like, good, because, and I think they were a little bit proud of me. So we all acknowledged it together. Right. That was a moment. And I think the fact that my parents supported me on that, what was a really big deal. But then I think, it was enough that I remembered it for the rest of my life. And so when I look back, I still go, do I feel bad about what happened? No. I mean, I was like, I don't know what would have happened if I didn't. I'm sure eventually he would have gotten tired and let off, but what would it have done to me and my self-confidence continuing on? And then also other kids, I think, did know that it happened. So then they were like, oh, don't mess with Rin-rin. Like, she might punch you. And, I mean, obviously I wasn't going around punching kids out. I was not the bully, but they knew I wasn't going to stand for it. So I think it made me feel better that people viewed me that way. And I think I started viewing myself that way. And so those are things I kind of noticed crept into my personality as I got older. And it's a story I like to kind of, it's like those anecdotes you tell at parties, like, oh, yeah, that's one kid who's annoying me and I punched him out. And people are like, whoa,
Rin-rin always has an icebreaker at parties now.
I know, but I don't think that they're thoroughly shocked. It's not like I'm this like meek, quiet person. I'm like, oh, I punched someone. I mean, I think they see it as it's part of my personality. They're like, oh, I can see that you had to resort to that. They're not shocked, but it is definitely, it formed part of who I became, for sure. Yeah.
That Rin-rin was someone that stood up for herself, and that became an identifier. I am someone who I can figure this out. I can handle it. I stand up for myself. Right.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Again, do not advocate for people but I would advocate those, encouraging your children to write things down. Right. So I think part of it is they may not go back and read it, but it'll reinforce something. It'll remind them that it happened. So like there are times, like even at our house at the dinner table, I'll be like, all right, everyone tell me like 4 good things that happened to you today. And it could be like big, it could be little. So they'll be like, oh, I got a good grade on my test. Oh, I go good. Or I had pizza for lunch. Yay. It's like, but I want them to remember. So they have to sit there, have to think a little bit about it, but then it reminds them that this happened. And so now they've had 2 instances of kind of experiencing it and then reliving it. And so that's kind of thing with when I was writing, I would write every day as a kid, like everything that happened in great detail. So sometimes I just don't even have time to reread my journals. There's just too many, but I remember when it happened because I lived it and then I wrote it down. And so now I remember it. And I remember going to high school reunion and like freaking people out because they're like, oh yeah, you had that blue tie-dye shirt. And they're like, oh my God, I forgot about that shirt. But like, I remembered, so it's fun to kind of just keep those things because it does help you as you grow older to just remember like where you came from or things that had happened. So
yeah, 100%. And so in my coaching, I do the same thing with my family, right? Like, what's the highlight of the day? Let's go look for the good. Because that at the dinner table, we can also like just really focus on everything that went wrong. And that's just our human brains, right? Mm-hmm. Our human brains will always remember like where we messed up, what we didn't do. And yeah, maybe the really big moments, right? The trophies, the recital where you get the ribbon. But I always encourage my clients to sit down and write what they're proud of from that day, right? Yeah. Like what is you, and you will find if you choose to focus on it. And yeah, you're absolutely right. It does take that moment of reflection of like, oh, I don't know, but you will find something that you are proud of. And then you get to relive that feeling as well. But it also trains your brain to see the good in the world, but also the good in you, because there is a lot within each of us. Yeah,
exactly. And something I like to do is, I did it more as I was an adult, but I encourage younger people to do this is like before a birthday, my friends and I would write down these little things like things I want to accomplish before I turn whatever. But we made sure it was a mix of big and little. So I used to be like, I'm going to write a book. I'm going to become a photographer. But then it'd be like, I'm going to learn to make, beef stew, or I'm going to, or I'm going to plant a flower garden. You have to mix in the small and the big so you feel these accomplishments. And it's been really fun going through my emails in the past and being like, what have I actually done? And I'm like, wow, I actually did a lot. I learned to make the beef stew and I learned to knit a sweater and I wrote a book. It feels good. And I think it's important to start that maybe younger, right? And you just have kids say what big things they want to accomplish in the little ones. And then they can kind of see, wow, look at all that I've done that matter to me. It doesn't matter to anyone else. Like if you learn to bake a cake, but it was something that you wanted to do for yourself. So I think that would be a fun activity to do.
I love it so much. And it's just a fun fact. Today is my kid's birthday. And so you have just given me something to work with. So thank you. And yeah, like if we think about confidence, I always think about all my clients have to set goals. Like what is the goal we're working towards? And it does, the goal for me is the self-confidence, but the goal, whether you achieve it or not, and you will, right? It becomes a playground for how do I talk to myself? How do I think about myself? What feelings am I willing to allow? And which feelings am I, really consistently avoiding, right? Like if it's going to be learn the piano or write a book, well, you got to be willing to allow a lot of discomfort, right? I'm sure even as a writer, there were plenty of days where you're like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Yeah, but those goals are the playground in which the self-confidence is born, because it requires you to feel all those feelings and to speak kindly to yourself every step of the way, and pick yourself up and dust yourself off and keep going. So I love it. I want it because I think, the cultural differences that are explored in this book are so important as we try to empower parents. How can we help parents? How can we empower them to help their children see and celebrate differences, not just in themselves, right? Because that is that idea of self, but also in other people. There's a character in the book that Ping Ping meets who asks her all these questions, but she does it from this place. Like, Ping Ping's a little skeptical at first, right? Like, is she making fun of me, or is she genuinely curious and like wanting to get to know me? But so how can parents navigate that and help their kids navigate it?
Yeah, so that was a real situation that happened to me when I went to sleepaway camp. Basically, what happens is Ping Ping meets a girl who was like, "Oh my God, your English is so good," and all this stuff. And that happened to me. I went to sleepaway camp. This girl just like gawked at me and was like, I've never met anyone whose English is so good like yours." And I was like, I was born here. I've lived here my whole life, but she was genuinely curious and fascinated. And I think she was also kind of complimenting me that she thought I was cool. Like, she's like, "But you're so cool." I'm like, "But I'm so cool." Okay, I don't know how to really take that, but I'm glad you think I'm cool, so we'll just go with that. And we ultimately became friends in sleepaway camp and all that. And so, but it stuck with me. But I think I don't know. I'm assuming, at least where I live, it's a lot more like embraced to be different, which is kind of nice, I guess. Especially in like a lot of communities where there is just a ton of diversity. I think people understand like every household just has their thing. So I think, and it's also funny because every household does have their own traditions. So it could just be your little family of 4 or 5 or 6, and you do things a certain way and no one else, but that is your personal culture, right? But then there's also things that maybe because you belong to a certain group, you do things, you eat your language or your food or whatever. And so I think it's good for them to be like, well, look at how many people in the world do this. Like, so let's go to, say, China. There's like over 1 billion people who live this way too, right? And in New York and Chicago and LA and stuff like that. So, but I also think it's good for them to learn, just because, like, say, we're Asian, it's also good to learn about what maybe a Jewish family does. Actually, we are a half Jewish family, so we've got that. But I think it's good for people for families and parents to introduce them to other cultures and to like show them. Oh, look, here's what like a Latino family does over here, and look, these people they're Swedish, look what they're doing, stuff like that. So I think acknowledging the fact that everyone's families are different and that it's cool. And I don't know, and give them those books to read or that media to look at or something. So and why it makes that person special, I think, is also important.
Yeah. So the exposure and then the conversation that follows.
Yeah, for sure.
And yes.
Yeah, like, I mean, we grew up in a United Nations family, so it was actually interesting because my dad, we would travel all over the world with him whenever he had trips. And so people were always like, "Wow, you traveled so young." And then, like, we do that with our kids. We dragged our kids all over the world too. And I was like, well, what they've learned is that things are not weird, right? Because they've now gone to countries where they've seen the whole country acts this way or does this or eats this. And so they come back and they see what single person doing that. They're like, "Oh, well, we saw that in Spain." Or, we saw that in Japan. And it's like, we want to normalize that for them. And so I think that's that exposure, or just getting people to realize it's not, there's what's weird. What's weird? What does that even mean? So
yeah, what's weird and what's normal, right? Because it's all right.
Yeah, exactly.
It's fun playing with semantics and also, that the ability to zoom out, and you talked about it earlier too, of like, the world is so big, and you will find people that look like you and talk like you, but you will also find people that don't, and both are beautiful things. And and learning about something new and how and why people do it. That's a beautiful thing too.
Yeah. I also think it's important for parents to kind of not focus so much on maybe the differences. So, for example, there was like a Chicago Tribune reporter who used to write about refugee families. I don't quite remember. They may have been like from Afghanistan, living in like a northern part of Chicago. And she focused on the teenagers. And this was great because it was like, yes, these children came from some pretty traumatic experiences and they were fleeing and now they're settling. But what are these kids really focused on? They're focused on their homework. Did they get their assignment done? What are they going to wear to school that day? What did their friends say on social media? Like that is their focus. It's like, yeah, you left persecution and everything, but you're really concerned about where your genes are. So we have to remember that they all have the same concerns. They all are living very similar things. And so I think also focusing on, don't be like, oh, that child came from very, very persecuted, was escaping this thing. Okay, but she's also just another child. So I think maybe helping them point out the similarities, or acknowledging the similarities for themselves as well. So is important, right? They're all just kids.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such a good point. A reminder that, like, yeah, we're all, that's all our humanness. We all share that. Yeah. Well, then another one you wrote once. In acknowledging the ordinary, we remind ourselves that every child's story matters, not just the ones marked by extraordinary circumstances or achievements. The quiet power of growing up, making mistakes, learning self-worth, and discovering one's place in the world is just as meaningful. So I think you talked about it even with like your dinner table, but like, how can we make a habit and on purpose, acknowledge those ordinary moments together?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's, again, just like asking them what's like, what special things happen. And it can be anything. And you can say, well, what did you have for lunch today? Or did someone compliment your sweater? Or, so you ask them like what little things happen and it helps them think, oh, these little things do matter and they are important and they made me feel good or they made me think about something. I think helping your child know that is important. And then, and do it for yourself too, right? I think we all put too much pressure on ourselves. I think we all look at too much social media and we're all a little bit jealous of what the next person is doing. And we just have to remember, but we've come a long way ourselves, right? So I think everyone kind of needs that.
Totally. I might not have written the book this year, but I learned the beef stew and I planted a flower. And my final one to you then, my rapid fire advice questions. What advice would you offer parents? I already know it. I know the answer. Who are raising kids in a world that praises perfection and achievement. And that might not just be, we talk about the dinner table and what we can do. And Rin-rin, I'm with you. I love asking my kid, what's something funny that happened today? And what did you eat for lunch? But they also have external voices and really influential external voices. The AP teacher and the travel soccer football coach. How can we help ground them? What advice do we have for parents to ground our kids in a world that really does put a high precedent, even as you said, like when we're looking at the kids' stories, on those extraordinary moments versus the ordinary?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I think just sort of just reminding them that, everything that they do matters, right? Every decision they make kind of drives them to the next point. Like how do you plan your life? You can't really plan your life, right? I think that's the important part. And to sort of like, it's okay to make mistakes because that will just take you to a new decision or a new path or a new whatever. And I think people need to just be constantly reminded of that, right? What is perfection? Like, what does that even mean? I think you need to define for yourself what you think is perfect. It's just giving yourself that forgiveness, right? Or just understanding that life is taking you a certain path And there's a reason why some things happened and some things didn't. So, yeah.
Well, I loved my time with Ping Ping and, goodbye French fry. Even Lee Beaumont, I loved getting to learn from. So thank you for this extraordinary book. Anything you want to add before we close out the show?
No, I mean, I hope everyone pre-orders it and enjoys reading it. It doesn't take that long. So I don't know. I think it doesn't take that long to read. And I think it's not just for children. It's adults, high schoolers. They should enjoy it too. And yeah, and just, keep thinking about all those little things. It's the little things that count, right?
It's the little things that count. I can't think of a better way to close out the show. My friends, why didn't they tell us that it's the little things that count? The extraordinary moments of life are wonderful, but so too are those ordinary ones. They can shape who we become, what we do, and the confidence that we cultivate. Rin-rin, thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you, Leslie. It was great being on here.
It was great to have you, and be sure to check out my show notes. And you can find all of Rin-rin's information in my show notes. You can follow her on Instagram at Rin-rin Yu, the author, or rinrinyu.com. You'll get all the announcements about when the book is out, when it's on shelves, and you can then purchase your copy from there. Till next time, my friends.
Love what you hear? Well, I'd love to hear from you. You can find me at confidencecoachforgirls.com. That's confidencecoachforgirls.com. Or email me at lesliethelifecoach@gmail.com. That's lesliethelifecoach@gmail.com. Hope to hear from you.